They were the invincible warriors of the deep, German U-boat men who believed they were fighting a soft, weak nation ready to crumble, but that certainty vanished the moment their eyes fell upon a colossal, unbowed orange structure stretching across the horizon. In that single stunning moment of defeat, Kapitän-Leutnant Klaus Richter realized he wasn't fighting an army, but a civilization whose power was so vast it didn't even need to hate its enemies. The air inside the torpedo tube section of U-boat 118 was not air at all, but a thick, cloying cocktail of diesel fumes, human sweat, and stale cooking oil, kept in perpetual motion by the gentle, insistent hum of machinery. In that metallic cocoon, 46 men drifted through the deep darkness of the mid-Atlantic, believing they were the invisible sword of a superior civilization. It was late spring, 1944, and at the core of that machine sat Kapitän-Leutnant Klaus Richter, an officer whose faith in technological precision was absolute. He dismissed the constant ocean churn, confident his high-tech submarine made him master of the hidden depths and the unseen war, far from prying surface eyes. His technical mastery was a source of unshakable professional pride, insulating him from the chaotic fear of the surface world. Richter was a man forged in the strictest discipline. He trusted the cold mathematics of engineering far more than messy human emotion. His world was measured in depth gauges and torpedo speeds. The men under him drew their confidence from his unflappable demeanor. They believed America, they had been told, was a soft, decadent giant. The U-boat, they felt, was proof of German genius, a small, extremely dangerous craft. The crew lived in sustained, highly focused tension, ready for battle, convinced their superior training would guarantee them the upper hand in every critical encounter, regardless of the odds. The claustrophobic confines of the U-boat were a source of pride. This was the crucible of the true warrior, a test of will and camaraderie they believed Americans could never understand. Richter often watched the faces of his young crew seeing fierce devotion. They were willing to sacrifice everything for a cause they were told was right. The loyalty of these men was the emotional metric Richter truly valued, proving their national resolve was stronger than the Allies' massive material wealth and fleeting political will. Richter carried a photograph of the new submarine pens being built back in Wilhelmshaven, a colossal complex of concrete and steel. He was convinced the Reich possessed a secret reservoir of strength the materialistic Americans could not counter. They had been at sea for nearly 3 months. This latest patrol had brought them dangerously close to the American coast, a triumph for Richter. He stood at the periscope, the Atlantic swell visible for miles. He had brought his crew to the doorstep of the enemy's might, completely undetected. This thought was the last comfort he would ever take in the confines of his steel tube. The feeling of being so close, yet unseen, reinforced his deep belief in the methodical genius of the German tactical planning, confirming their propaganda. Just 200 meters above them, the silent shadow of a massive American destroyer was already passing overhead, its sonar pinging methodically into the deep, and the long, agonizing countdown to their defeat was about to begin. The air pressure inside the U-boat had been constant, but suddenly, the submarine's steel skin registered a sound unlike any other, a deep, rhythmic ping, followed by the terrifying rumble of an explosive descending. It was the sound of the hunter realizing it was trapped. The metallic echo that preceded the explosion was the sound of fate closing its hand, a fatal rhythm they had never expected to hear, signaling the swift, brutal reversal of their tactical fortunes. Kapitän-Leutnant Richter did not flinch. His first command was sharp. "Alarm! Evasive maneuver! Prepare for impact!" The first depth charge was a massive, disorienting shockwave that slammed the boat sideways, extinguishing the lights. Glass instruments shattered, a pipe burst, and the rank smell of seawater mixing with battery acid flooded the control room. The chaos was instantaneous, turning the precision-built U-boat into a nightmarish, lurching tomb of fractured metal and escaping steam, instantly disabling critical systems. Richter knew instantly they were gravely compromised. The pinging was relentless. He issued the most painful command: "Scuttle the Enigma machine! Destroy all codebooks! Prepare to surface!" This was the moment of total defeat, the ideological collapse. He felt the humiliation burn hot, realizing the loss of the machine rendered their entire dangerous mission meaningless in the face of inevitable strategic capture. As the U-boat coughed its way to the surface, the crew members' discipline began to crumble. One young radio man began to sob. Richter's customary rage was absent, replaced only by a profound sense of failure. When the hatch finally blew open, the sound was a dull, metallic thud as the American destroyer's boarding party dropped onto the deck. The intense light streaming into the fetid interior exposed their weakness, extinguishing the last flicker of organized resistance and their desperate, dwindling hope. Richter emerged, his uniform soaked and torn, to face his captors. He braced for hatred. Instead, he met the gaze of a towering American sailor who merely motioned with a heavy revolver. The man's face was utterly devoid of emotion. He spoke in clipped English, "Hands up. Move slowly." As the crew followed, they saw American sailors watching with bored efficiency. They were treated like a nuisance, not objects of revenge. The final humiliating blow was the quiet realization that this overwhelming power did not even need to hate them. Their capture was purely logistics. Richter searched desperately for anger or even a cruel triumph, but found only a detached, professional air that underscored their absolute and complete defeat. Richter and his men were transferred to the deck of the destroyer. He stood defeated, looking back as his U-boat sank. He wondered what kind of enemy possessed the confidence to treat its most dangerous captives with such detached professionalism. The air inside the American destroyer's mess hall was a sudden, dizzying shock, smelling of roasting meat, strong coffee, and something sweet. Richter, given an ill-fitting boiler suit, stood blinking. This was the first place on enemy soil where the crew was given food, and the German war machines lie crumbled through sheer, staggering abundance. The sudden warmth and clean smell after the submarine's metallic stench was a physical shock that profoundly disoriented the prisoners and challenged their deepest beliefs. They had been taught to expect hunger. Instead, they were motioned toward a counter piled high with food. Richter watched his men shuffle forward, eyes widening at white bread, sliced thick and stacked in reckless towers. It was a staggering visual, bread that required no ration card. The very presence of butter and sugar, scarce in the fatherland, felt like a blatant act of material treason against their sacrifices and national austerity. A young American cook simply slid a tray across the counter: pork chops, mashed potatoes, vegetables, pie, and coffee. For men who had subsisted on ersatz coffee and thin soups, this was an insult to their propaganda. Richter's hunger twisted his stomach. He watched his second-in-command hesitantly accept a cigarette from an American sailor. The American simply lit the cigarette and walked away. There was no malice, only a perplexing, almost bored generosity. This casual, unrequired act of comfort was entirely outside the framework of military hostility and vengeance that Richter had always known. The crew sat in stunned silence. They had been told America was weak. Yet here on a warship, the Navy enjoyed a feast. Every single bite was a contradiction to Richter's ideology. He understood logistics, but this superfluity defied his military mind. Why waste such valuable resources on captured enemies? He found only casual indifference. Their power was demonstrated by their ability to feed their enemies better than those could feed themselves. It was a masterful, chilling display of American logistical and industrial supremacy and unchallenged resource power, proving their weakness. They were given a final instruction. They would be transferred to a prison camp. As the lights of the destroyer faded, Richter's mind raced. He wanted to believe the lies, but the taste of that American food still lingered, a profoundly confusing flavor of mercy and overwhelming power. His ideological worldview was literally being disassembled, one shocking, delicious bite at a time. The journey across the American continent began in a civilian train, its windows secured. Richter and his crew were sealed into a boxcar, their forced observatory into a nation unaware that it was supposed to be losing a war. The train car's rhythmic swaying and rattling was the unrelenting backdrop to their forced tour of the continent's colossal heartland. Hour after hour, they witnessed an endless, churning logistical machine. Their train seemed insignificant compared to the freight trains that roared past, kilometer-long serpents of steel loaded with supplies, tank chassis, crates, and raw timber. Richter felt dread. These trains demonstrated industrial output that dwarfed anything the Reich could sustain. The endless flow proved American production was operating at a sustained maximum, absolutely impervious to any wartime disruption. As the train cut deep into the heartland, the crew saw no blackouts, no dimmed streetlights. Instead, they saw enormous fields of grain and industrial complexes built overnight. Factories, miles long, glowing brightly under massive lamps, their chimneys belching smoke of boundless production. The sight of these sprawling, continuous operations defied the repeated German reports of severe Allied labor and resource scarcity and material depletion. The younger crew members were shocked by hundreds of civilian automobiles driving freely, a vision of personal mobility long vanished from Europe. They saw illuminated towns, shops bursting with brightly colored advertisements. The sheer density of civilian leisure, unhampered by wartime restrictions, suggested an untouched reserve economy of shocking and unimaginable proportion. Richter was staring at a nation that seemed to possess everything. The true logistical genius of the Americans was their scale. They had so much, they didn't even have to guard it jealously. Every mile of rail and every continuous flow of goods was a physical testament to a national capability his entire war machine gravely misjudged. The long, rattling transit was a methodical deconstruction of their worldview. Every mile brought them closer to the West Coast, closer to the final indisputable proof of their defeat. They had been told they would find a nation ripe for collapse, but instead they were riding through a land only beginning to tap its own strength. The final spectacular evidence lay ahead, waiting at the edge of the Pacific. After 4 days of rattling transit, the air acquired the salty tang of the Pacific Ocean. As the train slowed, Richter and his men pressed against the mesh, unprepared for the sight of unrestricted power. This was a spectacle of limitless, careless confidence. The prisoners expected the tense, scarred atmosphere of a capital under threat. Instead, they found an oblivious, electrically lit world of casual wealth. They saw the skyscrapers first, massive towers of glass and steel. Richter understood that every ton of steel represented resources, produced in addition to the war effort. These were permanent, towering structures of finance and commerce built without the slightest fear of aerial attack or the threat of enemy retribution. Below the towers, the streets swarmed with civilian life. Cars moved in an unending, bright stream. More shocking than the cars was the light. While Europe operated under blackouts, this city was fully, brightly illuminated. Shop windows blazed with unconcerned public extravagance. The excessive use of power suggested both limitless resources and profound psychological certainty of safety and an assured superiority. Richter and Schneider saw the same horror. Propaganda insisted America was a hollow shell. But a hollow shell does not build towers of this size. The confidence displayed here was a simple statement. We are too big, too powerful, and too safe for you to touch. The entire metropolis felt like a flawless machine, operating effortlessly, showing no sign of the existential stress that ravaged Europe. The sight of the city was a profound psychological blow. His pride in his submarine was extinguished by the sheer overwhelming scale of this civilization. The United States seemed barely aware the U-boat war was happening at all. As the train rattled past the last blocks, the expanse of the Pacific Bay came into view. The train was now slowing, bringing them face to face with the structural, artistic, and emotional proof of their utter and complete defeat. The story is just getting started, and the greatest shock of all, the final heartbreaking twist, is yet to come. If you find this journey through history's contradictions compelling, please hit that subscribe button right now so you don't miss the rest of this incredible story. The final segment of the journey took Richter toward the north. Then, the view opened, and the prisoners saw it. The Golden Gate Bridge, a monument of impossible, glorious scale. This was the moment the U-boat crew understood they had irrevocably lost. The bridge was an architectural impossibility, defying the German propaganda that had consistently dismissed American industrial engineering and technical ambition. It was not a military target. It was a structure built for peace. Its two towers seemed to mock the modest bridges in Europe. Richter stared in silence. This structure, built during the Depression, required a mastery of steel and political will. This bridge was a colossal symbol of a nation that planned for the next century. It was a vision of stability that made their wartime obsession seem temporary and entirely small, an irrelevant diversion from global progress. The U-boat represented deadly German engineering. The Golden Gate Bridge represented open, beneficial American engineering. Their mission was destruction. The American mission was creation on a global scale. Richter realized his U-boat had been defeated not by hatred, but by its sheer future-oriented ambition. The magnitude of its construction dwarfed their own nation's most aggressive and secretive war projects in both scale and purpose. As the truck moved onto the bridge, Richter felt terrifyingly insignificant. The bridge transcended materialism. It was structural integrity married to art. He saw the cables, a woven masterpiece. He realized this structure required more steel than his entire fleet of U-boats. It was the undeniable proof of a people who could manufacture, organize, and build on a scale previously unknown. The bridge was a testament to a permanent commitment to construction, a project for eternity, symbolizing enduring national pride and purpose. The bridge confirmed the truth. They had been fighting an entire world-building civilization. The war was a temporary diversion from America's actual work. As the truck came off the bridge, Richter closed his eyes, the colossal orange structure branded into his memory. He realized then that he was defeated not by a battle, but by a people whose confidence was built into the land beneath their feet. He saw a future he could no longer fight. The pride he had carried had collapsed, replaced by a devastating recognition. They had lost the war before they had even crossed the Atlantic. What does it say about a nation when the symbol of its greatest power is a bridge, not a battle monument? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below on how this sheer scale of American building changed the perspective of its enemies. The prison camp outside the San Francisco Bay Area was not the cold, vengeful cage Richter had prepared for. It was Camp Parks, functioning under the Geneva Conventions. The guards treated them as a logistical problem. The stark white letters PW on their uniforms indicated their status quo, but the whole atmosphere conveyed an unsettling respect for their military rank and background. Richter watched his men assign bunks with clean linen. He was informed he would be expected to work, but paid a wage. This payment baffled him. The American system was confounding. They were being paid by the enemy's economy for simple manual tasks, highlighting a bizarre wartime reversal. He found the workshops well-lit and supplied with tools. The philosophy was simple. A well-fed, busy prisoner was compliant. The system aimed to control morale through decent routine and order. Richter struggled to reconcile this humane treatment with animosity. He searched for the promised sadism, but found only the bland, professional enforcement of humane rules and orderly military regulations. The most immediate psychological challenge was the lack of hatred. The guards were professional, treating the Germans with bored decency. The propaganda that promised savagery felt like an insult to this reality. The strength of the American system lay in its moral power. The overwhelming American victory did not require the psychological advantage of enemy degradation. Kindness was a simple byproduct of confidence. One evening, Richter watched his crewmates playing soccer. He realized they were eating and resting better than many civilian families back in bombed-out Germany. He began his censored letter home. I am safe. They give us bread and meat every day. The full truth that the enemy showed more compassion could not be written down. This unexpected restoration of his dignity meant the Americans were slowly dismantling his entire ideology with frustrating, baffling courtesy. The question haunted him. If this is how the enemy treats its captives, what does that say about the society that created it? The unexpected dignity demonstrated their moral power, a terrifying weapon. The realization that they had been vanquished by a people who chose not to hate them was a slow, silent dissolution of everything Richter had believed. The true weight of Richter's captivity was the arrival of a thin, heavily censored letter from home. His mother wrote, not a victory, but of the relentless bombing raids and the growing scarcity. She spoke of the constant wail of the sirens and the terror that every night might bring the final, violent end of their difficult daily lives. Richter, safe and well-fed in California, felt the comfortable camp reality collide with the brutal truth. His own government had sacrificed its people while feeding him lies. He gathered parts of the letter to his crew. They were sickened. Their ideological foundation was dissolving. They were receiving more dignity from their enemy than their own system could provide. This was the final betrayal. The shame was a terrible counterpoint to the full bellies of the camp, starkly fueled by the enemy's food and massive logistical prowess. The disillusionment led to guilt. Richter had fought hard, but his sacrifice was based on a catastrophic miscalculation. He spent evenings in the library studying English and American history, seeking to understand the source of this decency. He read about constitutional protections, trying to decode a national character that valued law and democratic procedure above mere wartime vengeance. He realized that the greatest power the United States possessed was in its ability to separate the combatant from the civilian. This moral integrity was the final blow. He no longer felt hatred. He felt only a vast emptiness, replaced by a reverence for the strength found in fairness. Richter would return to ruins, but he would carry the indelible knowledge that the true measure of a great nation was its capacity for kindness, even toward those who wished it harm. The lesson was overwhelming. A society that honors its core moral commitments possesses an inner strength that is fundamentally unconquerable and enduring. The final, most profound lesson came over a cup of hot coffee in the engineering workshop. Richter was supervising a generator repair when Lieutenant Miller, the technical officer, approached him. Miller carried himself with the quiet authority of a man whose identity was tied to his trade, not solely his high military officer rank. Miller was an engineer. Their conversation began with technical specifications. Richter spoke freely, amazed that the American was treating him as a professional equal. Miller shared his strong black coffee. This shared moment of humanity, two men bonding over a machine, was the quiet climax. All propaganda collapsed under the weight of this exchange. Miller wasn't interested in vengeance. He was interested in learning. He spoke to Richter as one technical mind to another, easily bridging the vast cultural divide with common professional terms and genuine curiosity for knowledge. Miller spoke about America's future, dams, and large-scale projects that would elevate everyone. Richter listened, realizing American confidence was the self-assurance of a people building a better reality. "You're a U-boat captain," Miller said. "Why fight so hard for a system that was destroying your own cities?" Richter admitted. We were told we were superior. We believed the only way was through domination." Miller set his mug down. "We don't need to dominate you, Captain," he said simply. "We just need to outbuild you and outfeed you, and when the war's over, we'll help you rebuild because a stable world is better for everyone." His words were a rational, powerful strike against the core of Richter's failed national ideology, offering logic instead of destructive hatred. It was a statement of pragmatic, shocking mercy. The Americans' victory was so certain they could afford to be kind. They weren't fighting for hate. They were fighting for the stability of their colossal future. Richter wasn't vanquished by cruelty, but by a level of ethical strength he had never imagined. The simple shared coffee broke the last wall of bitterness. He stood up. "You are not the enemy we were promised," Richter said. He understood that the most potent weapon America wielded was its capacity for kindness. He realized true power didn't rely on fear, but on a quiet, unshakable confidence in one's own inherent goodness and national strength. He knew the war would end soon. As he looked at the distant, shining city, Klaus Richter realized that he would leave America with a debt of respect, carrying the enduring lesson that true power could be gentle. If this surprising moment of humanity between two former enemies touched you, share this story with a friend who loves history and remind them that sometimes the greatest victories are found not on the battlefield, but in a shared cup of coffee. The day the war ended in Europe arrived quietly at Camp Parks. The long, slow process of repatriation began, weighted by the knowledge of what awaited him. The trucks carried the former crew members along the roads that had offered the first glimpse of the Golden Gate. Richter made sure to be near the rear window for one final image of the structure that symbolized his defeat. There it was, vast and orange, now appearing less like a challenge and more like a silent promise. He saw the bridge as a beacon, a tangible hope for his ravaged homeland's reconstruction and future prosperity and success, defying destruction. As the ship pulled away, Richter looked back until the bridge dissolved. He carried only a few possessions and the memory of Lieutenant Miller's handshake. He was going home to ruins, but returning with the idea that engineering and construction could be used for peace. He carried the knowledge that American ambition was focused on making things work, an ethos desperately needed in Germany to begin the long healing and rebuilding process. The voyage was long. When the ship finally reached Bremerhaven, Germany, the scene was one of overwhelming devastation, shattered docks, cold air, and chaotic concrete. The smell of smoke and despair was a brutal physical blow, instantly extinguishing the easy sunlit optimism he had found in the American captivity. Richter returned home to find his family displaced. He faced the true physical cost of the war, but the American decency had given him something the returning soldiers lacked, a future-oriented framework. He refused to believe that Germany's destiny was simply to be a pile of rubble. Using the English he had practiced, Richter secured work as a technical translator for the Allied Reconstruction Authority. He argued for large-scale infrastructure, drawing on the image of the massive unbowed bridge in San Francisco. He became a fervent advocate for rebuilding cities not just quickly, but with a modern, future-focused design, honoring his experiences and lessons learned. In the ensuing decades, Klaus Richter pursued a career in civil engineering, helping to design new power stations and overpasses. He was known for his meticulous detail and his belief in the power of public works. He never forgot the Golden Gate. For him, it was the definitive symbol of a victory won by scale, stability, and ethical confidence. It taught him that the true strength of a nation lies in what it builds for the future. His life became a silent monument to transformation, proving that a defeated soldier could become a crucial architect of peace and national progress. By the time he retired, his segment of Germany was crisscrossed by new vital bridges. The engineer who had left Germany believing in the superiority of the U-boat had returned believing in the enduring power of a peaceful superstructure. The war, for Klaus Richter, was lost the day he saw the Golden Gate, but in that moment of defeat, he glimpsed the key to a future victory, a victory not of arms, but of human aspiration. He had gone to America as a warrior and returned as a builder, realizing that the greatest monument a civilization could construct was not a weapon, but a bridge. The truth of history is often found in the small human moments of profound realization. If Klaus Richter's journey from warrior to builder gave you a new perspective on the true meaning of strength, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe. We bring you forgotten stories of human courage and contradiction every week.